In the early 2000s, a strange thing began happening across America. Massive red and white big box stores that once dominated the electronics industry started going dark. These were stores where families bought their first VCR, their first home computers, their first video game consoles, and eventually their first flat screen TV. For decades, these stores represented the future. Yet almost overnight, Circuit City collapsed from being one of the largest electronics retailers in the nation to complete extinction. Most people today remember only the final headlines, but the true story is far larger. It is a story of a company that rose faster than almost any retailer of its time, only to fall because of decisions so destructive that business schools still study them as warnings. Circuit City began long before anyone had heard of Best Buy or Amazon. The story goes back to 1949 in Richmond, Virginia. A man named Samuel S. Wurtzel opened a small TV store after hearing that Richmond would soon receive television broadcasts. He named it Ward's Company, and it grew quickly by focusing on what most appliance stores ignored. Instead of treating televisions like complicated luxury products, Wurtzel made them accessible. He used demonstrations, hands-on displays, and friendly salespeople who helped customers understand how to use this new technology. This simple customer-focused strategy pushed the business to expand into multiple stores, and within 20 years, Ward's Company operated in several states. In an era before electronic superstores, this alone was impressive. But the true turning point came in the 1970s. The company realized that electronics were about to explode as a category. Color TV, cassette decks, stereo systems, and early calculators were becoming household items. Wurtzel and his team wanted a new kind of retail store, something bigger and more modern. In 1984, the company was renamed Circuit City, and with that change came a transformed identity. These new stores were massive compared to the competitors of the time. They arranged products on clean displays, allowed customers to walk through aisles freely, and featured knowledgeable salespeople who were paid on commission. That commission system became one of Circuit City's most defining features. The more a salesperson knew about a product, the more they could earn. So staff naturally pushed themselves to become experts. As the 1980s went on, Circuit City exploded nationwide. It grew at a pace almost no other retailer could match. By 1987, Circuit City had become the largest specialty electronics retailer in America. It was so successful that it entered the Fortune 500. It dominated cities, suburbs, and emerging shopping areas, making itself the go-to destination for televisions, camcorders, stereos, and eventually home computers. People came to Circuit City specifically because the employees actually knew what they were talking about. A shopper could walk in and walk out with the exact equipment that fit their needs. That reputation was priceless. Meanwhile, Best Buy was still small and unknown. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Circuit City was the industry leader, and Best Buy was the challenger. But the seeds of Circuit City's downfall were already being planted, even during its peak. The first major issue came from the way the company structured its stores. Circuit City locations were famously divided with an open sales floor in the front, and a large wooden-paneled counter in the middle called the fence. Sales associates worked outside the fence, while cashiers and product pickup staff worked behind it. It created a sense of organization, but it also created distance, something that mattered far more as shopping trends evolved. The second problem came from a risky venture in the late 1990s called DIVX. DIVX was an attempt to compete with DVDs. Customers bought special discs that could be watched for a limited amount of time before being electronically disabled. If they wanted to watch again, they had to pay a fee. Circuit City promoted DIVX heavily, believing it would become the next big home video format. Instead, the public hated it. Consumers didn't want a format that punished them for rewatching movies. They wanted DVDs, and DVD manufacturers did not support DIVX. The product flopped so badly that Circuit City lost around $114 million. It damaged the company's reputation and shook investor confidence. But even at this point, Circuit City could have recovered. DIVX alone did not kill the company. The deeper issue was that retail was changing and Circuit City was not. Best Buy, once much smaller, redesigned its stores to be open, bright, and easy to navigate without needing a salesperson. Best Buy removed commissions so customers felt less pressure when browsing. They placed products out in the open instead of behind counters. This warehouse style experience felt modern and relaxed, especially for younger shoppers. While Circuit City still catered to customers who valued expertise, Best Buy appealed to customers who wanted freedom. As the 2000s approached, online shopping also began reshaping the entire industry. Amazon was small but rapidly rising. Consumers were learning to compare prices online before stepping into stores. Retailers needed to innovate quickly. Best Buy began adapting toward an online future, but Circuit City made decisions that pushed the company in the opposite direction. One of the most damaging decisions in Circuit City's history occurred in 2007. In an attempt to cut costs, Circuit City fired around 3,400 of its highest paid salespeople. These were the veteran employees, many of them experts who had been with the company for years. For decades, these employees had been the backbone of Circuit City. Management believed replacing them with cheaper workers would save money. In reality, it destroyed the one advantage Circuit City still had. The new employees were inexperienced and lacked product knowledge. Customers immediately noticed the difference. Sales dropped, customer trust disappeared. It was one of the most widely criticized retail decisions of the decade, and business analysts still cite it as a key example of cutting costs at the expense of your core strength. Meanwhile, Best Buy was rising even faster. It launched the Geek Squad service, embraced reward programs, improved its website, redesigned stores, and focused on making the experience enjoyable rather than stressful. Circuit City did the opposite. Stores were aging and felt outdated. Inventory mistakes became common. The online experience struggled. As more customers gravitated toward Best Buy and Amazon, Circuit City's financial problems grew. By 2008, the pressure became unbearable. The economy collapsed during the financial crisis, and credit markets tightened. Circuit City needed cash to survive, but lenders were hesitant. The company attempted to close underperforming stores, cut costs, and restructure debt, but it was too late. On November 10th, 2008, Circuit City filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The hope was to reorganize and emerge stronger, but sales dropped even further during the bankruptcy process. Suppliers demanded stricter payment terms, and the company could not secure a buyer. By early 2009, Circuit City announced it would liquidate all remaining stores. The news shocked millions of people. A company that once dominated American electronics retail was gone in a matter of months. The liquidation process began, and one by one, every store shut its doors. When Circuit City announced liquidation in early 2009, customers flooded stores across America, not because they wanted to save the company, but because they were eager for deals. The massive red and white banners reading "Everything Must Go" became a familiar sight from coast to coast, but inside the stores, the atmosphere was far from the excitement that liquidation signs usually bring. Employees who had spent years, sometimes decades, with the company were now counting down the final weeks of their jobs, explaining to confused shoppers why certain items were not discounted yet, and watching the shelves empty faster than they could keep up. Liquidators took control of the stores and dictated everything. They controlled pricing, hours, staffing levels, and how fast merchandise sold off. Older CRT televisions that no one wanted were suddenly marked up at first, then slowly discounted. High demand items like laptops and gaming consoles were sold early to drive traffic. Meanwhile, leftover Circuit City brand credit cards, warranties, and gift cards became a nightmare for customers. Many people rushed to use their remaining credit, knowing that once the store closed, the value would be gone forever. As stores emptied, the company attempted to auction off fixtures, shelving, displays, demo stations, speaker walls, and racks. For longtime employees, this hurt more than the liquidation itself. They watched the physical structure of the stores being sold, piece by piece. The fence counters were ripped out and auctioned. Appliance displays that had been installed in the 1980s were dismantled. Even the massive red Circuit City signs outside the buildings were sold to collectors or scrap yards. By March 2009, most locations were completely dark. Thousands of retail employees, managers, and technical staff were suddenly unemployed in one of the worst job markets in American history. It is easy to say the recession killed Circuit City, but economists agree that the collapse was not caused by the recession itself. The recession simply exposed the weaknesses that had been growing for years. Best Buy was affected by the financial crisis as well, yet it survived. Amazon suffered through the same economic downturn but kept growing. Circuit City collapsed because its entire business model had been deteriorating long before the economy crashed. One of the most significant problems was store modernization. Best Buy aggressively remodeled stores during the 2000s. They removed clutter, introduced wide open aisles, created sleek product zones, and made the overall experience feel organized and modern. Circuit City kept outdated designs that felt cramped and disconnected. The company had hundreds of stores that still looked like they belonged in the mid-1990s, at a time when customers expected a more polished experience. Another issue was inventory management. Because Circuit City failed to modernize its supply chain, stores often ran out of popular items or carried too many outdated ones. Customers shopping for new HD TVs or laptops frequently found out-of-stock messages or incomplete displays. Meanwhile, Best Buy used improved logistics to keep hot products in stock consistently. That simple difference pushed more and more shoppers away from Circuit City. Customer service also took a major hit after the infamous 2007 mass firing. The expert salespeople who once defined Circuit City's reputation were gone, and their replacements were often undertrained and overwhelmed. Customers who remembered the days of knowledgeable, commission-driven staff now found disorganized stores filled with employees who simply didn't have the same expertise. This killed repeat business at a time when Circuit City needed loyal customers the most. As Circuit City liquidated, Best Buy took advantage of the situation. It expanded aggressively into markets where Circuit City once dominated. Former Circuit City customers naturally shifted to Best Buy, which now stood almost alone as the major electronics retailer in the United States. At the same time, Amazon accelerated its growth. Online comparison shopping made it easy for customers to avoid retail stores entirely, and Circuit City's website was far behind its competitors. Amazon didn't have the overhead of physical stores, so it could offer lower prices, and customers quickly learned that online shopping had become the new normal. After the liquidation, some investors attempted to revive the brand. In 2016, a group purchased the Circuit City name and announced plans to create a modern, customer-driven electronics retailer. They promised experiential stores, updated technology, and a strong online presence. But despite a few announcements, the revival never gained traction. The retail world had changed too much. Best Buy had adapted to the modern era, Amazon dominated online shopping, and specialty electronics stores were struggling nationwide. Circuit City existed briefly as an online-only brand, then faded again. In 2019, the revived website went offline for long periods and eventually disappeared altogether. The brand name was still owned by various companies, but the store itself was no longer part of American retail in any meaningful way. What made Circuit City's fall so tragic was that it had every advantage during its peak. It had loyal customers, knowledgeable staff, and a strong identity. For years, Circuit City was the place families trusted when making expensive electronics purchases. The downfall came from decisions that slowly disconnected the company from its customers. DIVX damaged public perception. The firing of experienced staff weakened the store experience. The failure to modernize created a gap between what customers expected and what Circuit City offered. And the inability to adapt to the rise of online competition sealed its fate. By the time Circuit City realized how much the world had changed, Best Buy had already become the dominant physical retailer. Amazon had transformed online shopping, and consumer electronics were no longer a mystery that required expert salespeople. Customers were researching products online, reading reviews, and comparing prices instantly. Circuit City had built its empire on being the expert middleman between technology and the customer, but in the internet age, customers did not need that middleman anymore. Today, the old Circuit City buildings have found second lives. Some became furniture stores or gyms. Others became local markets or discount chains. In many places, the only trace left of Circuit City is the shape of the building or the faint outline of the label scar where the giant red sign once hung. But for anyone who shopped there in the 80s, 90s, or early 2000s, the memory of walking past the fence, hearing employees demonstrating stereo equipment, or watching the latest video formats on display is unforgettable. Circuit City's story is a reminder that even the largest companies can fall when they fail to adapt. Dominance means nothing if leadership ignores the future. Successful companies must innovate, understand their customers, and never take loyalty for granted. Circuit City was once a giant of American retail, but giants fall when they stand still, and Circuit City stood still for too long. Thank you for watching this story. If you enjoyed learning something new today, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment telling us what you thought of this story.